Welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast, dedicated to parents and anyone else who loves someone in active addiction. Education is a powerful tool in breaking down stigma, fostering understanding, and ultimately helping individuals and their loved ones navigate the challenges of addiction. With Donna Marston, author of Peeling the Onion and Sharing Without Shame. So take a deep breath and grab some tissues as we uncover the stories of love, courage, and unwavering support in the face of adversity, as Donna and her guests share their stories without shame. Because when we share our stories without shame, we inspire others to do the same.
Hello, and welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast. I'm Donna Marston, your host, and today's podcast is sponsored by Snap Bands, a unique cognitive behavior therapy bracelet that integrates gentle physical sensations with a personalized mantra, cues to instantly transform unwanted negative thoughts into positive mental focus, stigma-free. To order your snap band, and here's my snap band that says blessings, and you just give it a little snap. It's called Snap Therapy. To order your snap bands, go to snapbands.com. That's snap with two P's and bands with DZ. And under comments, enter SWOS or Sharing Without Shame. So today I'd like to welcome Tom Conrad, who is a certified addiction counselor and also the host of Real Recovery Talk, which is a podcast dedicated to helping families and loved ones navigate addiction. So welcome, Tom.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. First question I always like to ask is, what would you like to share without shame?
Yeah, I had we spoke yesterday and I obviously knew you were going to ask that question because you told me that you were going to, and I thought about it and I'm like, it's a loaded question, but the one thing that I would say, and this could sound cliche, but I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm in long-term recovery now, and I can share without shame that I'm super grateful for everything that I went through. I'm grateful for everything that I put my family through. I'm grateful for the relationships that I burned, the financial strain that I put on people. I'm grateful for all of that. I'm grateful for all the legal consequences and just all the consequences that came with addiction. I'm grateful for that, and I definitely can share that without shame today, because had I not gone through those things, I obviously wouldn't be where I'm at today. So that would be my answer.
Thank you. So do you mind talking a little bit about your addiction and then your pathway to recovery? More about the pathway than the addiction, but just a little nutshell of that so that people get an idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Pennsylvania. So I'm in Florida, South Florida, West Palm Beach area. I grew up in Pennsylvania in this little town called Newcastle. It's just north of Pittsburgh. And growing up, it was just me and my dad. And I was an alcoholic from, I would consider, a relatively young age. I started drinking, pretty consistently around 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And at first it started as a weekend thing and then slowly progressed. And fast forward to 26 years old, I was drinking every day, taking a lot of benzodiazepines, Xanax, Valium, Ativan, doing other things, other drugs. And, it just, my world basically kind of crumbled out from beneath me. I was a trained auto mechanic. That's what I went to school for. I kind of followed in my dad's footsteps because he was an auto mechanic, and I worked side by side with him at a garage. But it was very blue collar. You worked and you drank and you would go golfing, and in the winter time you would work and you would drink and then you would go bowling, those sorts of things. And my addiction, my alcoholism had progressed to the point where I was isolating myself from everybody that cared about me, my friends, my family, because I had migrated on to other friends that, could keep up with me and that could drink as much as me and use as many drugs as me. And lo and behold, the last 3 weeks of my using, totaled my car, and working at a garage and a kind of a car dealership. Um, they gave me a rental car because I made up some cockamamie story about how a deer ran out in front of me, yada, yada. So they gave me a rental car. And then 2 days after they gave me the rental car, I ended up getting a DUI in the rental car. And then a week after that, they let me go. My dad actually was the one that called me and said, "Hey, Tom, I hate to say this, but you don't have a job, and you also don't have a place to live. I'm not going to deal with this stuff anymore. And, I'm done." And at that point, we and he had already done this. He'd reached out to some treatment centers. And at the time, I didn't know any of this stuff was even available, nor did I want to go. I didn't even think that there was an issue. He got me a one-way ticket to Jacksonville, Florida. And that's where I went to a treatment center in Jacksonville and Lakeview Health. That was a phenomenal program. They're still open to this day. I would shout them out any opportunity that I could. And I went there and I did 45 days of intense treatment, the detox, the residential. And then from there, transitioned to West Palm Beach and got involved in an outpatient type program with sober living. And did that for another 5 months, roughly, and then went and moved into just a straight sober living environment and stayed there through a year of sobriety. At a year of sobriety, I got a job in treatment for the first time, and the rest is history. Now I have a treatment center and do the podcast, help thousands of people. And so coming up September 16th, it'll be 14 years clean and sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so back then, because my son is coming on 16 years this month, there wasn't a whole lot of resources. You didn't really talk about it because there was
Right.
the stigma was pretty tough. Being a family member, I know I kept it a secret for a very long time because you just didn't want it to get out there. Now I think the different generations, they talk about it more openly, right? And there's more resources, there's much more available to people. Did you go to AA meetings? Did you do 12 steps? Was that all part of your recovery, or just,
Yeah. Yeah. So, when I was in Pennsylvania, and kind of to circle back to what you were talking about, the resources were they were limited in the sense of I wasn't looking for them. And I know the resources were there. I was in an environment that I wasn't looking for them. I was always looking for the next group of people to drink with, so on and so forth. I do agree with you that resources were definitely not as readily available back then as they are today. But going back to the AA and the 12 step stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never went to an AA meeting in Pennsylvania. I didn't know what they were. I had been given a big book from one of my coworkers, and he said, "Here, you might want this." And it was one of those things. I would stuff it in my bottom drawer, and I'd come home in a drunken stupor and pull this book out and read it on my bed as the room's spinning. And whatever, it didn't do anything at the time. But when I went into treatment, that's when I started to have my first introduction into 12-step program. It was, at first, it was rather strange, I must say. I mean, it wasn't something that I was used to. Obviously, they had talked about getting a sponsor and working steps and service work and all this stuff. And I'm like, what is all this? And, lo and behold, it ended up, as time went on and I kept being involved and getting more involved, I obviously could see, okay, there's something to this. And
Mhm.
I think that AA was and still is a big part of my life. But at that very moment, it worked best because it was coupled with treatment. I was afforded the opportunity to be able to go to treatment. I know a lot of people don't have that opportunity. I did. And that's where I got introduced into AA. It's worked wonders for me. Yeah.
I know, I remember when my son, when his last treatment, he was in and out for a few years, and when someone told him he needed to get a sponsor, he said, "Mom, I feel like I'm asking some guy to be my Valentine. I'm really struggling with this."
hmm
How was that for you?
Same thing. I mean, it wasn't something that I was looking forward to. The only reason I did it was because they told me I had to. But I found the guy that had the car and had the big muscles and spoke well, and everything from an external perspective looked like everything that I wanted. And I asked him to be my sponsor. And now, fortunate enough for me, he was a very solid guy, and his sobriety was extremely intact. And he was the guy that I latched onto in the very beginning. And that same man ended up, he was in my wedding and stuff like that. So I oftentimes tell people when they're looking for sponsors, you're not necessarily looking at the external. You're looking more at the internal stuff. Are they a good person? Do they speak well? Do they say what do they present in the way that they're speaking? And unfortunately, there are a lot of times people out there that are quote unquote sponsors that do it for the wrong reasons. It's more of an ego thing for them. They want to be able to tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, stuff like that. And you really have to be careful, learn how to navigate that stuff. But I also tell people you're not interviewing a bunch of people looking for the perfect sponsor, because reality is you don't have one right now. So anything is better than nothing.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think I'm hearing more and more that the younger generation, they don't want to do that type of recovery. They don't want to get into going to AA or NA. They don't want to get into a sponsor. Can you speak on that at all?
Well, I'll tell you where I'm at in South Florida, it's the complete opposite. Down here, it's the recovery culture down here is phenomenal. A lot of young guys, a lot of young girls come down here from the Northeast, and it's pretty amazing seeing the 12-step program in full effect down here. I mean, there's meeting places all over the place. I'm in Palm Beach County, and I can go pretty much any hour that I would want to a meeting. Obviously, no meetings like in the middle of the night, but if I wanted to go to a meeting at 11 o'clock at night, I could. And
Mhm.
interestingly enough, you go to some of these meetings and it's packed with young people. Now, the motives, sometimes are a little bit different, because you go to some of these meetings and it's like you walked into a club, and so you see all the girls that are dressed up and all the guys that are dressed up, and it's like a social thing. But even then, like, you're in the environment, you're in a meeting hall, there are people in there that have solid recovery. And I think down here, I can't speak on behalf of anywhere else, but
Mhm.
down here, it's booming. I mean, it's a huge recovery culture down here. 12-step in particular.
Yeah. So one of the things that you do in your work is you work with families. You work with
Yeah,
the parents and the person who has an SUD.
yeah.
Is that correct?
hmm
So, what are some misconceptions that people may have about addiction, recovery, going to treatment, moving forward in a pathway to recovery?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think from a parent's perspective, it really depends on where they are mentally. I interact with parents every day, and some of them are like, you know what, I can care less what you do, what suggestions you have. Like, I'll do anything. You just tell me what time to have them on the plane and I'll make sure they're down there. And then you have parents that they, on a surface level, want their loved one to get better, but they feel the need and the draw to really be heavily involved. And, I tell any parent, any loved one, if their loved one is coming to me for treatment in particular, I tell them, look, I'll correspond with you as much as humanly possible on the front end. But as soon as your son or daughter or whoever it is, your husband, your wife, aunt, uncle, they step foot in our doors, I'm done. So, and I need you, the loved one, to stay as uninvolved as humanly possible until told otherwise, until we invite you in. Because what I have seen with some parents, not all, is they want the daily emails, they want the daily calls with the therapist, they want to know absolutely everything that's taken place in the treatment process. And I've had conversations with parents and I tell them, look, I'm really close to discharging your loved one because we can't get anywhere with them because you're so involved. You have to stop. You have to, remove yourself. It's a helicopter parents, but some of them are cool as cucumbers. And you know what? There's a reason that my loved one's there. I don't know what to do. I have no idea what's going on. I'll take any suggestions. Those ones are super easy to work with, but you gotta, and for doing it as long as I have at this point, I kind of know how to navigate each one differently. And, some parents, I can talk to them in a very direct, matter of fact way and they'll receive it. Others, I have to kind of, treat it more with kid gloves and, help them out because they genuinely don't know. But it's a constant balancing act, I would say.
Well, it's hard because, we're sick and suffering too.
Yeah.
When our kids are in active addiction. And, one of the things I found out the hard way was that every time my son went to treatment, I didn't realize I needed to work my own recovery program.
Right.
Because every time he'd come home, I would remind him of everything he did wrong. I would throw the money he owed us, at him. You need to get a job. You need to do this, 90 meetings, 90 days. I threw stuff at him because I heard about it, but I didn't understand it.
Sure.
I didn't know what I was talking about, but this is what you need to do. And I think it's hard, for when our children, my son started going in and out of treatment at 20. So 20 to 25. It was hard giving up control,
Mm.
And letting somebody and trusting somebody that they're going to do the next right thing with my baby boy. Cause I want to love him and nurture him like he's still 2,
Yeah.
when he's 20 or he's 25 at the time for the last one. But that's hard. How do you handle parents? Like, is there one thing that you could say to somebody in a kind way, I guess, although I don't know, maybe you have to just be firm, but teach them that you have to figure out your recovery too, because you'll be toxic to your child when they come home. And it takes the whole family to connect, because they can come home and if there's a family member who's throwing stuff in their face or doing the unhealthy helping, or there's all this dysfunction going on, the kid's at risk.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah. I mean, Ben, he's one of the co-hosts of the podcast. And, oftentimes when he's interacting with parents, he'll flat out ask them, so what's your drug of choice? And they always do the random, like the dog head tilt that, when a dog hears and they're like, what? And he says, your son or daughter or whoever it is in this very stage, in this moment, they're your drug of choice.
absolutely.
And oftentimes that they can resonate with that. They can understand that because the behaviors that you are partaking in are honestly some of the same behaviors that a drug addict would do to get their drugs, or an alcoholic to get their booze. So depending on the circumstance and who I'm talking to, it really depends on how I navigate the situation. But, I've had instances where I've talked to, I'm just going to say moms, because I talk to a lot of moms, more moms than dads.
Sure. Yeah. I
I've
believe
had
that.
conversations where I've talked to moms 10, 20 times and given the typical standard suggestions of, hey, you need to go to Al-Anon. Hey, you need to find a support group. Hey, go to your church and see if there's a support group there that you can get involved in. Hey, you can't go about this alone. Hey, maybe you need to get a therapist. You play a part in this. This is a family disease, so on and so forth. And I'll have these conversations time over, and they will do nothing. And at that point, that's when it's like, okay, then I just tell them, look, so and so, there's a phrase I like to use: kill them from afar, or love them from afar, kill them up close. And I'll say, what does that mean to you? Love them from afar, kill them up close. And, I'll talk through it with them. You're continuing, you love them so much that it's causing you to do things that I'm willing to bet you understand are not good for the situation at hand. You're continuing to enable them, you're continuing to give them money, you're continuing to even track them. You have trackers on their cell phones. You're doing all these behaviors because you love them so much, but they're right there and you're killing them. They're right up. They're so close to you. And where I see the biggest transformation with particular young adults and their parents is when the parents just say, you know what? I'm out. I'm done. I love you. I will always love you. I want what's best for you, but I'm going to do it from way back here. I honestly, I don't care. Disable the tracker. No more money. No more this, no more that. You're on your own. Now, I'm not saying that parents need to do that right out of the gate because every situation is different, but there does come a point in time where you need to pull those cards. And, that is oftentimes when I see young adults in particular make a change. Yeah.
I call that caring from a distance.
Yeah, there you go. Same exact thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's tough because, my son, he was my drug of choice, and I was addicted to rescuing and saving him from,
Yeah.
the drug dealers and his addiction and, all that crazy stuff because I'm his mother.
Yeah.
And, for all his life, up to 18 years old, I told him what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And then all of a sudden, someone else is taking over.
Right.
And, and it's hard. So I like to call what most people call enabling unhealthy helping, because I think parents receive it better. Because when I was going through it, they would say, you're codependent and you're enabler and you're this and you're that. That was very shaming to me. And like, here I am loving my child the best I can, and yet I'm being criticized or judged for it. So now when I talk to the parents I work with, we talk about unhealthy helping, and
I
they
like
seem
that.
to receive it a lot better. You see
Yeah.
their shoulders relax, right? Because it's all in the name of love.
Right. No, I like that. That's good. I won't take it from you, but I do like that. It does sound better than enabling for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? We already feel like crap,
Yeah.
right? Because our kid is sick and there's nothing we can do about it. And one of the things I say too is that they need to be loved more, not less.
Yeah.
And learning how to unconditionally love them, but set healthy boundaries.
Well, that's the interesting thing. And I think that's one of the things that parents in particular have the hardest time conceptualizing is, and that's why I'm such a big fan of, Al-Anon and support programs and stuff like that, because it's not about them. It's not about the addict. It's not about your son. It's not about your daughter. It's not about those people. It's about me and the changes that I can make within myself. And if you can do those things and continue to have the support around you and, grow through these programs and really take everything that they have to offer, the whole situation gets better organically. And you really start to see things through a different lens. And you're no longer doing the things that you were doing before, and you're not partaking in the behaviors that you were partaking in before. And, your loved one might hate you for a period of time, but in the end, it's all for the greater good. But it does start with them really being willing to look at themselves and say, okay, I play as much of a part of this as they do. And if people can do that, then the recovery is great on both sides. From my perspective. Yeah.
So, I always talk about that we mimic each other's behaviors.
Yeah.
In a way. So when I talk about like the cycle of addiction and my gut stirring when my son was 15 and I suspected something was going on, but I didn't know what. And the allergy or the obsession of his addiction is starting to take over, and off he goes. And I'm chasing him around this circle. And as his addiction is elevating, I'm really starting to deal with a lot of different emotions. And then the natural consequences start to happen. He gets arrested, he's going to treatment, going to jail, whatever. Then that shame shows up for me. And now, I'm like, how can you do this to us? Right.
Yeah.
Go into victim mode. And then, Mama, if you bail me out of jail, I promise you I'll do this, this, and this. And I'll go to treatment. And so he goes to treatment, and then I'm cautiously optimistic. And as soon as his cravings start or whatever is going on, he takes off and he goes in that circle again. And I'm following him. I'm chasing him. And he's always 10 steps ahead of me.
Yep.
But I find that, we mimic each other's behavior. I had bad behavior. He had bad behavior. We say things to hurt each other because we're hurting, and it just gets messy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. That was the same situation with me and my dad. It was, he wanted me to get better in the worst way.
Sure.
But didn't know how, didn't know the things to do, didn't know really how to navigate it at all. And I mean, we would get in not fist fights, but pretty darn close. And the one of the worst things that I think you can do is label them. I would come home night after night. Oh, here you are, drunk again, Tom. Such a good alcoholic you are, and I'm like, oh yeah,
Watch me now.
Yeah. So, and then I wouldn't drink for 2 days, and I'd say, hey, Dad, look, a real alcoholic wouldn't be able to stop drinking for 2 days,
Right.
and I just did. And then I'd make up for it, on the third day. But it's a lot of it, I think, is lack of education. But I think for the most part, if parents and loved ones are at least willing to become educated, look at themselves, surround themselves with good people that have been in similar situations, if they can start there, then all the chips generally will fall in place. And the one thing that I tell parents all the time is you can't attach yourself to the outcome. The outcome may not be what it is that you would like it to be. I mean, I work in treatment. I've worked in treatment for many years now, and I've seen a lot of people die. And I've cried with parents, and I've had conversations with parents, and I've been to funerals. And the parents are like, the best thing that can come from that is when I have a conversation with a parent and they say, you know what, Tom, I know in my heart of hearts, I did everything that I could. And that's the best. Obviously circumstances aren't ideal, but when a parent can get to that point, it's good to see.
And that's when we hit our enough. Just like when my son hit his enough, and he was ready to figure out a recovery program. The same thing for parents. We have to hit our enough before we can put our boundaries in place and start and work our own recovery program. And I'll tell you, the night before my son was supposed to come home from his last recovery or treatment facility, and this woman called me up and she said, I hear he's coming home. And I said, yeah. And she goes, oh, you must be excited. And I said, yeah, but he has to do this, 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 and this. And I had all this stuff ready to
Yeah.
go on the attack. And she's a person in recovery. And she said, Donna, why don't you do something different this time? Why don't you zip your lip and why don't you work your own recovery program? And I thought, how dare you say that to me? I'm
Ah,
his mother. How dare you? And I don't know what happened that night, but something spiritually happened in my
sure.
sleep. And I woke up, I shut my mouth, I minded my own business, and I figured out a recovery program for me. And
That's
when he
great.
came home, I love you, honey, because I thought every time he'd walk out the door by saying, remember, you come from a good family, do the right thing today because we love you, was being supportive. In the big scheme of things, that's control and manipulation.
Right. Yep.
I had to
Yeah, it's
change.
definitely how he's seeing it for sure.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I had to change everything I did, the way I spoke to him, the way I interacted with him, and really, work a recovery program for myself. And
Yeah.
and parents don't often understand that we need to do that as well. Because if we don't, then we're toxic to their recovery.
Right.
And that's not often, that's not a good thing.
Well, and I think that to couple off of that, there's other people out there, as we work, and I don't know if you do a 12-step program or what, but in terms of AA, you know, the ultimate goal is getting to the place where now I'm helping somebody else. And, when parents can get to that point, they've been through everything. They've seen all the things. They've been put in these situations and, they've worked their program. They get to a point to where they can now help other people that are in the same situation that they were just in some months or a year ago, whatever the case is. And that's the ultimate, I think, gift when in through this whole entire process is you kind of have to go through the super uncomfortable, I don't want to do this, come up with all the reasons not to do it. You have to get through all of that stuff to get to the end, to be able to help other people in their situations. And if you can get to that point, then it's kind of smooth sailing from there, I think,
Mhm.
honestly. Yeah.
So my son, 3 years into his recovery, he decided to do step work.
Hmm.
And I really had been doing better, but I was doing more of a spiritual path for me, for my healing.
Sure. Yeah.
And so when he started to do the steps, I wanted to know more about it because I wanted to make sure it was okay. I hadn't let go completely of my control, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I found this woman, her name was Betty, and well, through him, because he would invite me to the step meeting. I couldn't
Sure.
talk, but I could
Yeah.
go and listen,
Yep.
and I loved it because I learned more from those meetings of the mindset and what goes on than going to like Al-Anon. That I had a hard time with Al-Anon. And so anyway, I found Betty and I asked her to take me through the steps. So I went through the steps the same way my son did. And I'll tell you, it was the greatest gift
Yeah.
because I didn't know that nobody had to live up to my expectations. I thought everybody had to,
Sure.
especially my
Yeah.
children. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a really important piece that, and if there is a 12 steps for people through Melody Beatty, I offer that with the clients I work with. I know Al-Anon has, they call it blueprints, which is
Hmm.
similar to the steps.
Mm.
But yeah, so
Yeah, it's a journey for everybody. And I think the 12 steps, I've said this, I think the 12 steps should be taught in school. They
I
never
agree.
will be, but I think they should be. I don't think that there's a person on the planet that couldn't benefit from it.
Absolutely.
And, it's worked wonders in my life and many, many, many others. I mean, it's been around, forever. So,
Since the
it's helped.
30s,
Huh?
right? Since the 30s?
Yeah, so Alcoholics Anonymous really started in and around 1935. Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob, and you had like the Oxford group, and there's a ton of history on it. I'm not a historian on AA. Ben, my co-host on the podcast, he eats, sleeps, and breathes AA. He knows everything about it. But yeah, I mean, it's almost 100 years old. It's gotten millions of people sober. It's across many, many, many countries. I don't know how many different languages the big book is in. It's a system that has been proven to work, and it's a spiritual program. There is a spirituality concept to it. I believe that it has gotten watered down over the years, but it's at this point you almost have to water it down so you can reach more people.
Mm-hmm.
But it works wonders in people's lives, and it's all about, if you look at the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's only one step where it even references alcohol, and that's the very first step. We can't powerless over alcohol, and our lives have become unmanageable. It says nothing about alcohol the remaining 11 steps.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a program for living. Okay, I'm going to look at myself internally. I'm going to look at my environment. I'm going to look at the things that, my resentments, my fears, my sex inventory, all these things, my shortcomings, my defects of character. I'm going to make amends to people. I'm going to learn how to pray. I'm going to learn how to meditate. I'm going to have a concept of a higher power. I'm no longer God, and I'm going to help other people get sober. And, it works wonders for people. And, I think that it can be applied in just about any aspect of your life if you really do it, the way that it's laid out.
Right.
Yeah.
So about ready to wrap up. What advice would you give anyone who is hesitant on seeking treatment or a pathway to recovery?
Am I talking to a family and loved one, or an addict?
A person with a SUD, substance use disorder. Yeah.
There's really no good excuse not to. Obviously there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, insecurity. We can come up with all the excuses in the world as to why we shouldn't get clean and sober. And there's honestly no good ones that I've come across. And, I've been sober now almost 14 years, worked with thousands of people, and I haven't seen a good excuse yet. So you just gotta, you have to do it. I mean, no matter, you got to put the fear aside, put everything aside, and just, reach out to somebody close to you, or if it's not close to you, if you don't know anybody that's sober, like I didn't, I got on the phone with a treatment center, and, they really started my journey for me. But it just starts with really picking up the phone or talking to somebody close to you. But ultimately, I mean, you have to be the one to make the decision, or else somebody's going to make it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that can get messy. It really
Right.
can. But
Yeah.
so.
Well, thank you. So how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So, the podcast is on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. It's Real Recovery Talk Podcast. Obviously you can go there and listen to everything. You can reach out to me directly, Tom at realrecoverytalk.com. We have all the Facebook and Instagram. Everything is at Real Recovery Talk. And if you want to get to myself, Ben, and Dr. Tambini, she's our medical director, so she takes a lot of our medical calls or questions. It's just info at realrecoverytalk.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to support the Sharing Without Shame podcast, please subscribe, like, and leave a review. If you're in need of emotional support, Donna offers private sessions. For more information about Donna and the services she offers, visit www.sharingwithoutshame.com or email her at Donna4support@comcast.net. Nothing in the Sharing Without Shame podcast is intended to establish a therapist-patient relationship or intended to replace the services of a trained therapist, doctor, or health professional, or substitute for professional mental health, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Until next time, may your faith and strength heal your heart.